Yeah, so that brings us to the next thing, which is hope. What is your concept of hope?
I don't really have a good way to describe it. Like, it's just, um, just, just the wish that good things will come. You know, the most basic of, uh, the yearning of the expectance
Yeah.
that something good would happen, or not necessarily good, but just something that you want to be done. You know, will happen.
Uh, the expectation and faith of better things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's anticipating a future better than the present. And it's actually vital to our health and our well being that we have hope. Studies, I mean, there's been proof out there when you lose hope, you, it's really hard to live, it's really hard to survive because if you don't have hope. The lack of hope leads to depression, it leads to suicide, it increases your physical issues like health problems, things like that, stress, heart issues. All of that stuff goes up when you don't have hope. But if you do have hope, the opposite happens. Your health gets better, your well being gets better. Um, hope is very vital. Was someone going to say something?
Yeah, doesn't it like emotions that are tied in with hope and positivity, and um that's, I believe, like your brain actually produces serotonin, and like
Yeah,
the good hormones that makes your body like feel better.
there's some actual medical things going on there. And I'm actually doing a study that we're going to talk about next year on the whole science of well-being um, and how that ties in with what the Bible's been teaching us all along. I'm studying that now, and we're going to talk about that next year. It's like next month.
Well, it's next year, yeah.
Yes, next year. um, But so for the Bible Project, if you get a chance to watch that video, if you did, it is, they have a video on hope, and they have a video on all four of the concepts of Advent, but they describe it as to wait for. They have multiple, of course, words that are used in the Bible for hope. One is that they use that is a good comparison is that they wait in expectation or a state of tension for something. That anticipation of something. And in the Old Testament, they had that type of hope and that waiting for the Messiah. And they were hoping in anticipation, that expectation with that great tension for deliverance and for that true shalom to come, which they believed that Messiah would bring. And they were wanting that deliverance and that true shalom in their relationship with God, and for healing for their nation, because they were sinking into self-destruction. I mean, look at the world today. We're doing that right now. Everything. I mean, there's this hope for something better in the future, but a lot of people don't know what to hope in to bring that about. And it's not really the same thing as optimism, because optimism is choosing to believe the circumstance will work out, and it's kind of based on circumstance or odds, whereas biblical hope is not based on those things at all. It's not based on emotion. It's not based on odds. It is often there's often not even a sign that things are going to get better, that you choose to hope anyway. It's hope still remains, and hope keeps you going when optimism fails. And the Old Testament example of that would be in Hosea 2:15, where Israel is being oppressed by foreign empires. They're looking back on their history to how God has surprisingly delivered them in the past. For example, when they were delivered from slavery in Egypt, suddenly they did not expect it. They did not see it coming, but He was moving all along to bring about this surprising rescue and deliverance out of slavery in Egypt. And they were looking back on that in the Hosea time frame to give them hope for deliverance in the future. They were looking back on their history to look forward to the future, to give them hope for deliverance again. And they had been waiting on, at this point, and through up until the New Testament time frame, they'd been waiting on God for over 400 years with nothing but silence. And what got them through that 400 years was they kept looking back on His faithfulness in the past to bring them their hope for this surprising better future. In the New Testament, that surprising better future showed up with Jesus coming as Messiah. He's described in 1 Peter 1:3 as our living hope. In our present human states, we're all slaves to evil and death and self-destruction. And Jesus' surprise response through coming as the Messiah, taking on, He had this surprising response of taking all of this self-destruction and all of this evil and all of this death onto Himself. He lived out His life in love. It's a living example of God's character to everyone. He was bringing about anticipation of the future deliverance. Even back then, they were still looking for the future deliverance. And He took on the death, took on our guilt and our slavery to death and our self-destruction on Himself, paying the price for our freedom. And through His resurrection, He conquered death itself. So that empty tomb is bringing about a new hope, a new anticipation. Metaphorically, we are being reborn into a new, different human that is no longer enslaved to death or to self-destruction or condemnation or guilt. And by accepting His gift of that sacrifice, that surprising response, we are reconciling our relationship with God through shalom. Through shalom. And Romans 8:21 through 23, again, it says that the universe is groaning as we wait eagerly for shalom. So the future hope is, we look at what happened with Jesus and with that reconciliation with God, and we see that what He has is planned for the entire universe, not just for us, not just for the world, but for everything, the entire universe. So then biblical hope is choosing. So it's a choice. It's not really an emotion even. It's a choice of waiting in anticipation that God will surprise us with a much better future than the one we have right now, that is just as or more surprising and even than what He's done before. And for example, with the entire universe and the reconciliation of truth alone for the entire universe, He could bring about something that is just as surprising or more so than having a crucified man rising from the dead. And it's not about the odds, and hope doesn't look at the odds. It looks back at the surprising deliverance through the resurrected Christ to look forward to a universe with true shalom. And so has there ever been a time when you've looked back to look forward to get you through something, if you feel like sharing?
I guess I can look back to the time when I was just on my own, and I thought you know how like you have a plan in your life that you're like, at 25 I'll be married and have a kid on the way kind of thing, or this and that. And I got really depressed when I when those plans were coming into fruition, and I felt like I was a failure, and general depression stuff. And I can look back now and be like, nah, I was just going through the world, going through life as I could, and sure, other people might have been more quote unquote um what is it successful than me, but it doesn't matter. I got a house now. I have I can do my finances properly. I don't worry about them like stressing all the time. I wouldn't say my life's perfect, but it's definitely better than it was.
Yeah.
So
Well, for me, it's like going on right now. I mean, going on pretty often. It's like I had a plan, like, yeah, I was gonna be so at such a place at a certain age in my life, and none of that happened. And life got flipped upside down multiple times. I was another story for another day. I took things into my own hands because I didn't like God's time frame, and that made things worse. But I ended up in a very unhappy, unsafe situation, and then I wound up getting divorced, and then none of just like everything flipped upside down, and entire life failure. That's what I viewed it as. I had to restart my entire life from scratch, and then within a year of that happening, I lost my job. So it's like I was pretty on it. I was pretty like out of hope at that point. The only thing keeping me alive was the fact that I had a dog waiting for me at home. That is the only thing. And so there's been, I somehow got through that with friends, but then here again, I lost my job again, and I lost my home again. But I have to, looking back on when that divorce and that whole life disruption happened, I wouldn't be the person I am today if none of that had happened. There's been a major change in me and in my personality and in my situation and relationship with God since that happened. And now the same thing is happening. Like, I can look back at how I was 2 years ago and see I was this way. And 2 years ago, I don't even know if I'd be talking to you the way I am right now. I would not have been a pastor, that's for sure, because I was still stuck in the same mindset of women are to be silent in the church, because that's what I was taught growing up, and I was still fighting through that even back then, and I still have trouble with that now, but not as much. But so looking back on how things have changed and seeing that there is some kind of path that God's dragging me on, because I'm like kicking and screaming the whole time. He's dragging me along where he wants me to go, and I'm having to look back to see, okay, he hasn't steered me wrong yet. It was me making my own decisions that always mess things up. But if I let him do it, stop trying to do it myself, then I'll see that it's gonna be better if I just let him do it. That's where I am.
I guess I kind of have one. I don't know if it fits into the exact concept, but I don't know if it's a hope thing, but kind of the same thing you said, where just kind of letting God take the wheel sometimes pans out really good.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, way back in the day now, because I keep getting older, but I used to be into a lot of drugs and things of that sort, and one day out of nowhere, this girl calls me up and she's like, "Hey, you want to come over and get high?" And something in me was like, "Don't do that." And my friends were all like, "Well, of course we want to go get high." I'm just like, "Don't do that. Just, I don't trust it. Don't do it." Anyways, long story short, I don't go over there. And then a couple days later, I get a call from a cop telling me that apparently there was a drug dealer at her house and she had stolen drugs from him and said I did it, and that guy was sitting there waiting with a loaded crossbow.
Oh.
And ever
Ooh.
since then, I've always
Wow.
trusted that little deep down feeling where God's like,
Yeah.
"Don't do that."
You might not be here. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, but looking at that gives you hope that he's doing something, and if we just trust him and listen to him, then things will turn out better than when we do things the way we want.
Oh yeah. Whenever I get that little twinge, I'm like, "Do the thing God says," because the other thing's not going to work out.